Hello everybody. Julia Simas here, Agent 12 for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and I'm with some wonderful astrologers here as well from, well, all of you are in the USA, aren't you? Hello, USA agents.
Greetings.
On my top left, Gemini Brett, which we all from the CIA know very well. Gemini. On my bottom left is Andrea Michelle. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining. And Gary Caton, who has made it through storms and ice and trails to be
What?
here.
I'm unstoppable, baby.
Yes, you
That's
are.
the way, because we're here to talk about, well, one of our, well, favorite, there's a lot of favorite subjects in astrology, but Venus mostly. And the times that we are in now as we are, well, transitioning from the end of the Mars retrograde that's stationing today or over the next few days at 17 Cancer, and moving to what as Venus begins to station retrograde for next week. So how does it feel? What is going on in America? It's almost like culminating this Mars retrograde, and now it's going to be Venus retrograde from the things that have happened to how Venus will react to all of this. That's how I'm kind of seeing it. Tell us something about what's going on over there.
But I think it's interesting that Trump's been president for both of these Leo to Aries Venus transitions. It's a pretty intriguing thing to take a look at, and to try to take a look at that without a bunch of bias is pretty tricky to do in astrological circles, I think. But I mean, I
Yeah.
see it as like a activation of the feminine, right? And maybe the Aries feminine, Ariel spoke about this in our first Venus Star webinar, the Star Point webinar we did 8 years ago now, right? We come full cycle, and she was
Just
really
after Trump got
referring
elected, of
to
course.
like the
Yeah.
Leo cat in the like pussy power hats that were back happening back then. But I mean, it's interesting to see as well, just in Trump's cabinet, there's a lot of super strong women figures. So those are some notes that I would add to the mix, but it's hard to say that word Trump without, causing
And he
ripples.
and he appointed the highest ranking openly gay man to any office. Trump did. So, it kind
Yeah,
of
right.
blows up, that kind of blows up some of the narratives about him. I was in Spain last summer when he was shot, and we were walking the Camino Santiago, the old, old Neolithic pilgrimage route across the north of Spain. And I was tired, and I stopped in to get a drink and maybe a bite to eat at a place like this, like a little cafe on the side of the road. And I saw on the screen, I mean, I didn't know what they were saying because my Spanish is spotty at best, but I saw that picture of him, with his blood and going like this. And I thought, oh my God. But we were on our way to see Venus. I was there with a bunch of students, and we were walking the Camino, and we were going to wind up at the Atlantic Ocean to see the Venus heliacal rise in the west. And I mean, symbolically, what happened when he got shot, he went down, and they pushed him down, and then he was like, I'm getting up, and he got up and did, and it was just so symbolic to me of Venus going into the underworld and then coming back out again, and I thought, wow, like, I, you know, I never really thought of him as a Venusian figure before, but that whole thing, and then his inauguration at least was timed with basically roughly the Venus elongation,
Elongation, yeah.
and yeah, it's wild. And yeah,
Mm.
as Gemini said, he has appointed some very powerful women, Pam Bondi, Tulsi Gabbard. I'm sure I'm missing a few.
Okay.
The chief of staff, whose name I'm forgetting,
Yeah, Caroline Leavitt, or
Gnomes, right? Who's been showing up interestingly. What's her name? Christy Gnomes. Like, so she's
yeah,
head of Homeland Security now.
yeah,
And she's been showing up in these like just kind of blown out hair, like super Venusian, but like in like SWAT vest style. It's
Ah,
like a pretty interesting Aries Venus. I mean, it's a kind
yeah.
of, I don't know, it's hard not to see it almost comedic, but I mean, it's really interesting to see like the symbolism is pretty clear. And I think that like reminder that this doesn't have to be, it all shuts down. Like sometimes we're most inspired. And Gary, actually, I wasn't aware that he's appointed like an openly gay man to like a highest position ever in the cabinet. But that's kind of cool because that seems like a Venus Aries signature as well. Just that Aries has initiative and starting things
First,
The
going
first
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 of
and can
things,
be
the
about more.
first,
Right?
the first of things happen with Aries,
yeah,
the Aries star point. Yeah, we see things that have never happened before.
yeah.
Yeah, but what about all the people that have lost their jobs and all that kind of stuff? Is there an uprising about this kind of thing going on? I mean, what's happening in that way?
I mean, I think
Everyone's getting axed, or I mean, that's what I'm
Well,
hearing. I'm not there.
it's just incredibly polar and divided, you know? I mean, some people who think Trump is some savior are like excited about anything he's doing, no matter what. Some
Yeah,
people hate everything he does, no matter what. I certainly feel for people who are losing their jobs, regardless of whether they work for the government or not. But I mean, the main thing that's happening now that I find to be intriguing, it feels much more mercurial to me than Venusian, is just like the insane amount of information that's coming out about where our tax dollars have been spent in just the most ridiculous ways. And then
ridiculous.
it's like, if I turn on the TV, nobody wants to know about that. They just want to hate Elon Musk for
yeah.
going in and finding. And it's like, it's just so weird that people have been so polarized that you can't even look at information
You
without
don't
having like
really.
a emotional response before you even go there. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it's hard to try to walk the middle way right now.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
imagine if one of us was spending money recklessly for, even 1 year.
I
I mean,
am.
I know you have, but I'm just saying, like,
I'm a Pisces, so that happens.
this stuff has been going on for who knows how long. We've been just pouring money into all kinds of things that's just ridiculous. I mean, literally,
The
they're,
bureaucracy of it all, where
yeah,
these
they're
things
doing
take
things.
forever to happen.
Yeah, like it's kind of Virgo, really. If I mean, I don't know where the Virgo comes in, but they're literally doing things like where there's a building
South Node?
that's not, yeah, maybe it's the South Node, they're doing things like, hey, there's a building that's like 90% unoccupied. Let's terminate the lease on that building, move the few people that were in that to another building and save some money. Like, how
Wow.
does that not make sense? So
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know. What do you think, Andrea, about all this stuff?
Well, honestly, I'm not much of a mundane astrologer, so I don't really see it through that lens, but I'm intrigued by, like everyone was saying, just we cannot see past polarization, and it feels like, Mars retrograde in Cancer has a lot to do with emphasizing that, just reacting before stopping and responding.
Yeah.
And I was curious because I know that Trump has his Venus and Mercury in Cancer. I don't know what degree and if Mars is stationing opposite them, but
25 and 23 or something, I
oh,
think.
okay. So Mars
Mm,
has gone will go by a third, go by them a third time.
forward. Mm-hmm.
But I know it's just, for me, it's just nothing. I mean, with Pisces North Node, it's just like nothing is as it seems, right? And everybody's going to see reality through their lens. And so I feel like so much of, not to get too far afield from Venus and Mars, but Pluto in Aquarius is just like different realities. People are going to see realities in very, very different ways. Either the real shit of it, Pluto, or the possibility for transformation. And I think that Gemini alluded to, it's like, do we put our energy toward just fighting a system, which has its place? And can we also put our energy toward creating the societies we want? Like just going for what we want and putting our energy, our creative energy toward that, because that
Mm.
feels more sovereign in itself, like more of a self-responsible, but also creatively potentiating possibility. And so whenever we have,
He's a little Venus.
whenever we have a baby in the picture, it makes me go,
Baby fire.
This is the resistance,
Hi, Mama.
right? So when the world is crazy, try to bring in amazing souls and
Hi,
let them
baby.
be who they're meant to be, right? She just
Yeah.
wants to say hello.
Oh my God, you
We'll
guys.
know what it all means when they grow up and we look back at these times and yes.
Yeah, that's what we're
Yeah, I
doing
mean
it
the world's
for.
always crazy. So I remember starting off in a crazy place too. I know, that's what I was saying. But yeah, my fear is like, as Andrea was saying, like, you know, should we resist? Well, it's kind of like there's these two groups in like where I'm living, and that seems pretty global as, I mean, not fully global, but so many places that are like resisting in opposite ways. And then the fear, of course, with Uranus coming into Gemini is like, you know, last time that was World War II. The time before that was the Civil War here in the States. And, you know, like, I think it's important for us to remember that there's a common thing to resist. And I like what Andrea is saying as well. Like, how about like just stop fighting against and start moving towards, right?
Yeah,
Like, how
yeah.
about planting new flowers? And it's
Well,
just
this is
hard
the
to see.
0 point. You know, we're coming to that 0 point in so many ways with Venus, with Mercury retrograde, with Neptune, with Saturn. It's like a huge revisioning. Remember, Aries is the eyes and the vision and you know whatever comes from that. It's a
And
really good
that's
sort of image
That's
to
what's really happening. You know, this
yeah,
is way bigger than the US because this is
yeah,
about the US role in the world.
uh-huh,
We're not just doing an internal audit of our
yeah,
finances, which is long overdue, if you ask me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm opinionated, but guess what? In America, I got a right to my opinion, and I'm just gonna be an Aries and say it. And I'm sorry if anybody, you know, has a hard time with it. I apologize in advance. That's just who I am. But this is actually bigger than us. You know, it's our relationship with all of these other countries that we've been sort of, you know, there's this whole idea that is sort of actually it's very, you know, colonialist in a way, that the biggest country is supposed to be like the police force and the bank for the rest of the world,
mm,
you
yeah,
know? And that's actually what Trump is saying no to. He's saying, no, we're not going to be your police force and we're not going to be your cash cow.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you guys got to start thinking about like ponying up, pay your fair share, and we're going to try to mind our business. And I don't know, but I mean, wow, maybe that's a good thing.
Well,
Actually,
I'm sure there's going to be great things, but you know, when you hear things like, you know, the Gaza coast to become a Riviera, you know, we all kind of go, oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
well, see
So,
that kind of
you
stuff.
know.
What you got to understand about him with that kind of stuff. So he has Mars rising. And here's the thing.
On
It's
Regulus,
Mars,
yeah.
it's Mars rising in Leo, but in its own terms, in its own bounds. So bounds dignity is the ability to define, or in this case, redefine the terms of engagement, the deal. So when he sees in his mind that there's a bad deal, the first thing he does is he says something seemingly crazy because he's got all this Uranian stuff, right? So he says something to blow up the old deal. He purposefully does outlandish stuff that doesn't make any sense, but the purpose is to blow up the old way of thinking. So now we have to negotiate a new
Yeah.
deal on new terms. You see? So that's the thing you got to understand with him is like, yeah, that sounds crazy. It's supposed to.
Right. I mean, he has a book about it where he says,
Yeah.
when you come in, make the most ridiculous statement of what you want ever, and then people are going to respond more in the way that you want them
Get
to.
more
rather than
attention.
you don't start with what you want, because then you end up compromising, right? So hopefully that ridiculous image is simply some fairy tale beginning to settle into a different place. I don't know. But like that's the kind of thing where like I try to watch the extremes of both sides. Because I mean, first of all, I learned a long time ago that politics is the entertainment division of empire, and like at least let me be entertained in every way that I can be. But it's really crazy how some people definitely see him as like the savior, and other people as literally the devil. It's just the most polarizing thing, and
Yeah,
you know.
Gemini. Yeah.
When I showed up for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency recently to speak about the lunar standstill, like a really interesting thing to learn about that standstill cycle, which is at its maximums now, is that like literally contributes to the highest tides of the 18.6 year cycle, surface temperatures, mosquito blooms. Like there's all of this Earth effect of the lunar node getting to 0 Aries that's measurable by scientists and whatnot. That I love that, but like.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Right, imagine that. But it's crazy title, and he's the most title. And when you look halfway back through the cycle, that's when like Trudeau became prime minister. That's when Trump was riding down the golden escalator. That's when Zelensky was playing the president on TV, right? Like, I mean, it's intriguing when you just go back to the other side of the cycle. I also wonder if we're getting off on the wrong foot or in the wrong planetary costume, but maybe not.
It's all right. Whatever we're getting to, it's all good. Let me just start the slide share just so we get moving a little bit with this. Hang on.
You know, I did want to just say, I just checked, and
Not
Trump
showing
was
anything.
born into a Venus Aries cycle. I mean, depending on how you do the cycles.
Oh,
So
Sorry.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
me,
He's
I
coming
always look
around.
at the retrograde Venus Sun conjunction to begin the long cycle, like the 19-month cycle. And back, so he's born June of 46, and it was April 15th, 1945.
Yeah, so he's
Venus
coming
came
into his
between
natal
birth and
cycle.
Sun in
It's going to
Aries.
be, it's not this coming birthday, but the birthday after that, that'll have like the solar return with the Venus return.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
Venus is
right.
an interesting player in his chart in a tons of ways, which we should expect.
Now
Well,
I'm
Venus
hoping we
is,
can all see each other still. Can you see each
Yeah.
other? Yeah, yeah, okay, good, good, good. Keep talking, keep talking.
Venus is
Um,
in his chart is conjunct Procyon, isn't it, Brett?
Yeah, and then just separating from Saturn, they're pretty
Yeah.
strongly
And
conjunct.
Saturn's
And
on its own node. His chart is incredible, man.
it is an
You know,
intriguing
if you
chart.
hate the guy, I'm sorry. Like his chart is incredible, just from pure astrology. There's so many. He's got a blood moon on Ras Al Hagi. Like there's so many things. Just
Well,
incredible.
I'm just starting to put together a table of the Moon Venus conjunctions throughout this cycle, and I noticed that one of them is right on Regulus. I mean, it's right on Trump's ascendant. And I'm wondering, Gary, I feel like you of the four of us probably, maybe I'm wrong about this, has done the most work and like kind of the magic and the energies of the fixed stars. It seems to me like, because some astrologers are arguing about Trump's birth time, that he's like a very good example of Regulus rising. I mean, I shouldn't say like a great example that
It
I would like
does.
to see it as
Why are
like
they
the
arguing about the
honorable
birth
Lion
time?
King, but
Because literally, if he was born like 9 seconds later, he'd be a Virgo rising, right? Is that what you're talking about? Like literally 9 seconds.
Oh.
And you know, I mean, come on, what? But to me, like he's so obviously a Leo rising to me. And either way, even is assuming we're still within like 15, 20 minutes, he's gonna have Regulus rising no matter what.
yeah, and he's clearly Mars rising. I mean, the dude's red.
Oh my
But
God,
like,
Orange Man, yeah.
what do you recommend if you're sitting with clients who were born with the Royal Star rising, or maybe more specifically, Regulus rising?
Well, you know, I really love Bernadette Brady's take on those stars. You know, and here's the thing, I did a lot of research on this, and the modern take, you know, I should sort of the Virgo thing to do is to sort of you know, counterbalance that with the fact that the modern take on the royal stars only goes back to like the 17th or 18th century. We don't really know that it's a truly ancient take, but what we do know are two things. A, that these stars were basically connected to the world axis, the solstice and equinoxes during the Persian times. In other words, when the Zoroastrian, Persians were doing their, astrologers were doing their thing. There is some question whether or not these are indeed the same stars that they identified. Thank you. And that's just, that's probably unanswerable. But what we do, the other thing that we do know is that the Zoroastrian mythology is very binary. It's very black and white. It's very good versus evil. In fact, their view of the world is that there's a war in the heavens between good and evil. And so Bernadette Brady's portrayal of these stars is having a very powerful light side and also a very powerful dark side that you have to avoid. Like, that seems right on to me. And in my experience, experientially, it seems very apropos, So, the things that she says about Regulus is the dark side is revenge, and this idea.
And the power of money. Isn't there something about the power of money in that? Like, the money won't give you everything you desire or something, or it's
more
like
with Aldebaran, isn't it?
I think it was Regulus, like utilizing money in the wrong way will not give the good rewards.
Interesting. I don't remember that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Regulus, but anyway, yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, these royal stars, we just got through with a full moon on Regulus too, right? Like, so there's that. But these royal stars, they're very bright and they're very close to the ecliptic. And the other thing to remember about royal stars is, like, when we talk about Venus, Venus is one of 7 wandering stars that enclose the Ptolemaic cosmos, has the Earth at the center, and then there's 7 heavens.
Layers,
these 7 heavens are seen to be basically like engines of fate. So Venus rules over, for instance, our romantic lives, our artistic, creative lives. The way that our lives play out, she's sort of in charge. She has say over that, right? The fixed stars, being in a sphere above the 7 planets, they sort of have this overriding influence of being able to override. And so what's interesting about, Trump has so many fixed stars. He has Regulus, he has Algol, he has Procyon. Algol and Procyon are 2 of the most protective stars you could ever want to have. Okay, he has Saturn on its own node. He has a blood moon on this. Here's the thing that I think people don't understand about Trump. The negativity. He has a blood moon on Ras al-Hagi, which is it's in the forehead of the serpent bearer, Ophiuchus. What is this guy doing? He's wrestling a serpent. What does that mean? Serpents have transmutative power. He turns poison into power. So you can throw all this negativity at him and he just turns it into energy that he uses. And yet they still, I said years ago when they tried to impeach him, I said, it's a mistake. Shouldn't do that. And, they did it again, and they just kept throwing all this negativity at him because no one before him is. I remember when I was a kid, they had this guy named Gary Hart. They got a picture of him with some woman sitting on his lap. That's it. It was just a woman sitting on his lap. He was done. He was in the primaries, that it was the end for him. And compared to
keeps getting away with it, the trickster.
And so I think it's unprecedented what we're seeing. And I think that the power of these fixed stars is on display of being able to step outside of this normal area of fate. Like, fate means like this idea that, like karma, for instance, or like, sooner or later, like it's going to catch up with you. You're not going to be able to, get past these bad publicity, whatever. Like sooner or later, everybody else that's ever ran for president and had, 1/10 of the negative publicity that he's had has gone down in flames.
Mm.
But these fixed stars are operating on another plane, and I really think it's a very dramatic example of how that, there's another level of operation that's going on. So
Yeah, good point. They're beyond the planets.
yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, let's move on with the slides for now. I mean, it is a huge subject, what's going on in the US and everything, of course. But also very much related to the times that we're going through. Someone just asked about like the reason we're getting together is like a prelude for what we've got going on next weekend as Venus turns retrograde, and that's for our 11th episode or session on the masterclasses on Venus star in her different points. So 8 years ago we began. And now this is our 11th session, and it's the first time that we've invited Gary and Michelle, Andrea, to join us, because we've had different sort of, let's say we've had Ariel Goodman, colleagues like Adam Gainsbourg, Patricia Walsh, a few others over the time. So now we're kind of drawing in some more, context and others that have been doing this Venus work in so many different ways. Because it's such, as we'd all agree, it's such a rich subject, and there's so many sort of fractals to look into when we look at Venus, or the Venus cycle in a greater context. So today's kind of a prelude to that, and we hope that will entice more of you to join us for the 6-hour kind of journey that we'll take next weekend. And just want to sort of tell you about the picture that I chose. Someone asked me about this picture, and it comes from Simon Quaglio's stage set for called the Queen of the Night. And as we know, Venus is called the Queen of the Night, and that's exactly where she is now, just past her greatest brilliance, as we say, as the evening star. Just over the last few days, can't remember the exact date, but we're in that now where Venus, as her crescent phase, begins to sort of fall down to Earth. So it's a really beautiful time to watch in the evening sky, although from my place, she's already really quite low. I have to go through the trees to sort of find her. And it's happened so quickly. The last, since January the 12th, the maximum elongation, it's happened so quickly. So if you're not watching that, I suppose I urge you all to watch that. But look, this is so interesting. So the magic flute, Mozart's magic flute, that's what this painting was, or this stage set was painted for. And you can almost see like these angels or floating, angels are kind of bringing down the night and gathering, almost gathering her up to take her, well, to the retrograde, right? Or to the underworld, which both the retrograde and the outer conjunction are known as Venus in the underworld for different, for short amount of time with the retrograde and so on. But isn't it gorgeous? I just thought I had to sort of tell you more about that one. And then I actually had a look at when Mozart's Magic Flute premiered on the 30th of September 1791. And look, Venus is just stationing retrograde.
Oh my goodness.
So there was something in that. Maybe they were watching that, that sort of timing for, making the stage pattern. So isn't that beautiful? Venus stationing, and the moon would have been there. Anyway, so this is where we are now, and I've just set the time for, this evening in Melbourne, but seeing Venus still high up in the evening sky, and how quickly she's going to turn. She's pretty much on her retrograde degree, or 1 degree off, yeah. And again, do you want to say anything about this sort of timing right now, guys?
So she's going to station in the first decan of Aries, right?
Mhm.
Yes,
If
yes.
she moves to 10,
She does move to 10
Oh, so
Yeah.
that'd be the
second,
start of the
second.
second, yeah.
in the second decan. Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
10 degrees 50 minutes is the retrograde station.
10,
Okay, so
15.
closer to 11, yeah.
So the
Uh,
three of wands.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's comforting given the sort of the first decan of Aries is a Mars decan, and the second, well, in the Chaldean system anyways, and the second decan is more solar. So to me, the sun is a little bit more of a benefic influence than Mars. So this idea that she's stationing in the second decan, hopefully there will be like some steadying influence from the solar influence on that decan. Because things
Do you
Okay.
read
seem
it as
pretty
a mutual reception with the sun as well? The
right.
Pisces Aries elongation kind of foreign
Yeah.
exchange program between the two?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, mutual. Each one's in the other's exaltation. Yeah,
And
Yeah,
I'll
right.
show some pictures later as to why, unlike Melbourne, Australia, which is as far south of the equator as I am north, and for Andrea, even further north than me, in California, and she's in Washington State, we're going to get to see Venus for many, 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 many days. And she takes a very kind of almost straight line fall in this particular cycle, which has to do with the straight and the crooked signs and with Venus's nodes and all sorts of cool things.
And the north and southern hemisphere difference, yes.
yeah,
Fascinating. And that's always something we have to think about because so much is said in, so many different ways or giving the character of something when in fact it's so different down here. So, the character developing from its physical or, visual sense, and meaning, let's say, which is not understood by many, I have to say. Anyway, so Mars is stationing retrograde at 17 Cancer, which is really interesting because Sun and Mars, the next Sun and Mars conjunction, again, Mars has just finished his retrograde, will be opposite this point next January when Venus also joins. So Mars, Sun, Venus conjunction, not exact, but early January next year. So we can look forward to that. And I just wanted to bring in that, again, the Mars-Venus synodic cycles being so kind of close together, overlapping, is really the only synod that this happens in. There's not any other synod of Mars and Venus retrogrades that come close to this kind of overlap, right? Unless you guys know more. I did have a look, in that sort of sense. So these are the dates for, well, of course, we just finished the Mars retrograde or finishing, and the Venus retrograde, which begins in Mars's sign. It's like the baton being passed. Mars has done his job now. Venus, over to you, to go further with it, right? So looking at the Mars-Venus synods, we go back to years that now. Sorry, just before we do that, this is the Mars cycle that we're in, or have just finished the retrograde. So we're mid-cycle in a sense. The next one begins at 19 Capricorn next year. Trump was born into this cycle, right? Trump was born into the synodic cycle that began at 22 Scorpio before his birth, right? So this is the cycle that he is born into, which is interesting. How old is he? He's 72. Is that right? No, he's 82.
No, he would have been 79 a couple years back.
Yeah, like when that started. Yeah, when this started. That's right, the
Right.
79-year cycle. So
Yeah.
anyway, just keeping in mind how I think how rare this moment in time is with all the other stuff that's going on as well. The lunar standstill and, the extremes that we're sort of finding ourselves in. And anyway, you can read more about it. I've looked into this, the synods of Mars and Venus together in Sky Spy from last November. This is the Venus star pattern that is current and alive in our world today. And we are, of course, heading towards the retrograde, the internal conjunction with the sun when Venus is here. And just to remember that this is a star point that also that happened as an outer conjunction in 2021. So we connect the retrograde coming up, if we're using the Venus star, to 2021, to also 2029. That will happen in 4 years' time, and also all those 4-year increments. Okay, so that's how you kind of the Venus star. Yeah, sorry.
Well, this is really important to understand. There's only 3 planets that are capable of penetrating the space between the sun and the earth.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I mean, astronomers call this the astronomical unit, which just sounds so sterile.
Right.
It's the heart space of our system. It's the holy of holies. It's the only place we know of where life exists. And there's only 3 planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, that are able to penetrate that space, become closer to the earth than the sun is. And right now we just had Mars go through, and of course, Mars typically, I remember a couple retrogrades back when Mars penetrated this space, we had a lot of fires in California. Well, here comes Mars again, and we have fires again.
Yes,
You
yes, the
know?
closest past, yes.
So there's this penetration of the Earth, the Sun-Earth space by Mars, and now Venus is coming through, and hopefully, I mean, they're really alchemical opposites. It's almost like if Mars is the wound or the burn, if you will, Venus is the salve for the
Yeah,
burn.
yeah,
And
right.
so
And if
hopefully-
Mars separates, Mars is about a separation principle, whereas Venus is connecting principle. So yeah, the two of them it's like important to sort of notice them working together, let's say, right? So this is the Aries ingress that is coming up, and which makes it so unique, having Venus and Mercury retrograde at the same time. As the Aries ingress, with all the planets in Pisces and this stellium in Aries. There's just so much kind of, let's say, power in this.
Neptune is anorectic,
Yeah,
the final degree of the zodiac.
I'd like to share something a little bit about what's been coming to me about the end of this Venus and Leo cycle, if I may, because
sure, yeah, great.
ties into the theme of where Mars stationed retrograde in Leo and where Venus is stationing retrograde in the second decan, which is ruled in the Chaldean system by the sun. And I'm going to bring this in when I present next week, but I've been reminded that we kind of take the sun for granted. We're talking about heliacal cycles, right? And so the way that I'm seeing it in a very simple way, which Aries is very binary, right? In a very practical way, is the sun is what we are and the planets are who we are. They are the fractals of expression of the various qualities of the sun. And so it just seems like for us to remember, not to take things so personally, personal planets, remember what we are before who we are. And that's part of what informs us. And just to come back to our center, because there's this beautiful alchemy of the triptych in a sense, because we have the sun and the planet in question in the heliacal cycle, and then we have the earth. So there's this element of 3, which is very alchemical in nature. And it's it's like there's an instability there, which is good. There's this alchemical potential for something to emerge from those 3 dynamic principles. And that's one of the reasons why I love heliacal cycles, is because it has that kind of embedded in there already, is that it's happening. What's happening between the sun and the planet is happening within us. We are the participant in which these things are happening. And I love that, because the more that we take ownership of that in ourselves, about we are this amalgam of a what and a who, we become more participatory in our own life,
Mhm.
and we can really, really help engage and light that fire, that flame, remind other people of that just by our own being. And so to me, this is part of what I'm taking with me from this Leo Venus cycle, and hoping to continue in whatever way it shows up in the Aries Venus cycle.
Mm. Yeah, it's good to remember that cycle we're just finishing, Leo, Gemini,
Mm.
now to Aries, because if we remember that Leo cycle, like it started with a bang. It was full on as well. Do you remember? With the Barbenheimer craze, the actors strike. Again, now we anticipate the next retrograde. What's that going to sort of bring up, and descent in certain ways. The Aries star point is known for, again, the people on the streets, the warrior archetype sort of going, this is wrong, we don't like this, how much of that we're going to see sort of rise up again. But the thing here is also Mercury and Venus retrograde at an Aries ingress together. I have not found, I looked for them both being in Aries. I have found Venus retrograde in Aries and Mercury back in Pisces, but not both together. I couldn't find one, back till
Interesting.
the 1500s or something,
Really?
unless I overlooked something. So, that could
Wow.
have been possible, but it was like,
Oftentimes you'll
okay,
find a 40-year cycle with those two, but
40 year. Okay. Right,
40
right, right.
years, they have these conjunctions that are just fleeting. They're like sort of passing each other, and then they have these conjunctions where they run together for like
For a
a week
while.
or two. Those
Right,
are 40-year intervals.
right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, wow, that's remarkable. I mean, if we're looking at something that has not happened since the 1500s, wow.
Well, because we have to look for the Venus star point, like the Venus to be near the sun, right? The
right.
Aries, near this Aries point. So we're going back 251 years as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I look back at that period, and anyway, totally fascinating. That
Yeah.
this is such a unique sort of moment, in that sense. Anything you want to say about the Aries ingress there, Gemini, or anyone else?
No, I'm gonna wait because I have a
Okay.
bunch of things
All
to
right.
say.
Okay. Let's keep going. So this is the Venus star point that happens the day after, or actually I'm not quite sure how many hours, but the Venus star point at 2 Aries, very close to an Aries ingress. So very much infused into, let's say, the year ahead. The year ahead, as we look at the Aries ingress to kind of tell us the flavor of what's to come, and we go back to that throughout the year and all that kind of thing. We know Chiron return for the USA is still happening, isn't it? With the
Yep.
21
Make
degrees.
America healthy again.
Make America healthy again, yes.
I mean, how literal is that?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And in the geodetic map, Chiron is on, and Chiron and Eris are actually right through the USA ascending. Like if you understand geodetics, 23 Aries is Washington, D.C., as an ascendant. So, those two being right on there at this time is really significant as well. But let's move on, because I know you guys have got a lot to share. This is the Venus star points that we look at, and they oscillate, of course, from retrograde to outer conjunctions and so on. And so the Aries point is where we're kind of focusing on now, and we do see it coming into action like quite a bit before. I see the star points really like eclipse points that sort of have a flavor that is coming into action before they're up, before they're
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So as we can think about the Gemini star point that happened last June, and the flavor of that was conjunct Uranus, that star point, or Uranus's node. And the advancement of AI. I mean, there's so much scamming about the AI now, with cryptocurrency, and you can't believe what, you really have to be careful out there. So that star point was conjunct Uranus, and we talked a little bit about the Leo star point that started this whole cycle. And then this is what it, let's say, looks like visually. We're going from Leo. We were in the Gemini star point. Now we've coming down to the Aries point. Venus is here right now. Okay, so it's a 19-month cycle, and it works like clockwork. So every star point has a theme. In a sense, if you've been looking at it for a while, and so this Aries star point. Things like Eris was discovered under that star point. The GFC and Bitcoin launches under this Aries star point. The Trump's Against rally against Trump and misogyny and the pink pussy hats, like Gemini said before, happened under this star point, or happened. And then the last star point was in 2021, the outer conjunction out here, Aries one, was when there was riots against vaccinations, like mandatory vaccinations. And that star point was conjunct Chiron, right? And here we are, being told we have to, vaccinate, and now we can see a recurrence of that theme as people are trying to be appeased to be paid out and going, sorry you lost your job, or sorry you had to be vaccinated in order to keep your job. So we can see these themes kind of come back and repeat, and again, watch this space, right? And here's just a bit more info on the Aries star point themes that I've collected over the years. Think like, again, the first things happen with the Aries star point, like first YouTube video ever uploaded was under this star point, right? That's so interesting. April 2005. As I was saying before, Bitcoin, the miracle on the Hudson. Again, these are very kind of brief. Conjunct Uranus in 2013 with Mars. Edward Snowden's, kind of story going on. A Russian meteor. Pope Francis, the first pope from Latin America. Black Lives Matter erupted. So we can see these kind of themes going. And then 2017, again, the Trump misogyny rallies leading to Me Too, and then further down the track, sort of Weinstein story. The Handmaid's Tale was released. And then 21, as I said, riots against vaccinations, the attack on the Capitol, as you know, women's uprising against violence and abuse. And these things, once they're sort of activated, kind of continue to go. You know
Well,
what I
it's
mean?
interesting.
Continue to happen.
Julia, what you were saying about Aries, and Gary knows that I mentioned this before at the Sky Astrology Conference, that this is going to be the first year in June that Aries breaches North Declination.
Ah, okay. Oh, she's crossed the zero, right?
She's at zero, but she's still by arc minute in South Declination. But she's
Oh,
going to be
wow.
yeah. So I feel like that's going to be a tectonic.
Yeah, right. And we know Eros, goddess of discord and chaos. The chaos we need, let's say, the chaos we kind of need to shake us out of the slumber of, I don't know, of the last so many years. Yeah. And it's interesting at this start point as well, I haven't mentioned that the ruler of, Aries, of course, Mars is still out of bounds during all of this, April, and the Venus retrograde, I think most of it. So that's interesting, isn't it? And so by the time these themes of the Aries star point kind of live out, we start seeing the Capricorn star point kind of coming into action, a few months down the track. So again, using the star points is about kind of merging their stories in a way, or that I've learned to see. Now, Gary, this is your graphic from the last Venus cycle. Thank you for all your work, of course, that we've all learned so much from. I just put that in, I know, before you gave me yours, but anything you want to say about this?
This is a more complete map of the entire Venus synodic cycle with the lunations that happen during what we call the descent, where Venus is getting lower in the morning sky, in 7 meetings with the moon, and then there's 7. And so this number 5 here was what I was referencing earlier. Number 5 was Heliacal rise happened around June 10th. And that was about the time that Trump was shot. And so it's interesting how, this cycle began in Leo for instance, right? Heliacal rise east was August of 23. It began in Leo. So there's some really like, so here's something that's really obvious. Recently, we had the greatest brightness of Venus in the Leo cycle. So now, what are some things that are associated with Leo? Leo and the sun, gold. Gold recently reached an all-time high right around the time that Venus reached greatest brilliance in the Leo cycle. Okay, now if you had invested in gold back in August of 23, you would have made 50% return on your investment in 18 months.
Yeah, right.
And it's a pretty easy, I mean, you know, oh, the Leo cycle is being activated, invest in gold. Like it would have been a really easy call. You have this Leo guy who wants to run for president. You think there's a chance he might win? Well, I don't know. He's got Venus on his side. You know what I'm saying? Like it's pretty, it just, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, this is a very detailed map because I like to give people opportunities to follow it step by step. But if we just go back to the fact that it rose in Leo and that colors each step of the way is like another experience of the Leo archetype, whether we're going down, experiencing the downward stripping away of the Leo archetype, or if we're experiencing the building up, and the greatest illumination of the Leo archetype literally means gold is at an all-time high. I mean, it's so
wow.
it's so right on, you know.
And Venus at her brightest right now. Did it happen this week? Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, the brightest Venus in the Leo cycle, and you got an all-time high for gold. It's just you can't make this stuff up. You know?
So everyone follow Gary's work, of course. He's a pioneer in teaching us a lot about this synodic cycle and the descent of Inanna into the underworld through the Venus cycle has been so valuable to many of us. So look, I think Gemini now, before we go into this, well, again, this is the Aries star point. I just want to point out that it's Mars ruled, and the next 3 star points, the next star point in Capricorn is conjunct Mars, and then the cycle ends in Scorpio at a Venus star point in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. So we have this whole...
And those are all Mars decans too.
And all, yes, right. I've got that image later as well. But yeah, but now I think we'll move over to you, Gemini, because you've got something to say about this particular...
And the coming Scorpio conjunction in Mars's face, Mars's decan, and Mars's bounds as well, like maybe the most Martian zone of the zodiac on my solar return. So I'll look forward.
So this particular Venus synodic cycle is so Mars orientated, right? It usually is, because Capricorn, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, but this time it's actually conjunct Mars as well. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, cool. There's a couple of places I want to share. And everyone, feel free to chime in on this. So, School of Earth Astrology. Much of this, like the way that I approach the Venus synodic cycle, comes from Daniel Germario and Kaylin Kinsell. Daniel now at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, but I studied with them when they were at Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and a lot of us kind of found out about the Venus synodic cycle from the work that Daniel was doing, just as Project Hindsight was happening. We were starting to uncover some of these other ages of planets, like the 8-year cycle of Venus and such. Now, I haven't finished this yet because I have to do these by hand now because of a software shift. But anyway, this is just looking at the Moon-Venus conjunctions. Gary, I think you start with the crown chakra after maximum brightness, so this one will vary slightly from yours. But Daniel works after the Venus station direct. Now, he wouldn't call this an Aries cycle, however, because Daniel's working with the heliacal rise and defining that as the time that Venus is 10 degrees from the sun. And interestingly, if we do that, then we're looking at the first Pisces cycle in our lifetimes, which is an interesting thing to consider.
Yep.
Now, this is where I was coming from 8 years ago when we started these Venus Starpoint webinars at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. Ariel Gutman at the time, I think, made some decent arguments for working with the conjunction rather than the 10-degree heliacal rising. And I'm going to speak to some of that now. I will say I think the 10-degree rule is like a good rule. It's like a good global average. But anyway, you can play with this table later. I'll probably show it as well when we reconvene in March. Of course, we're still in this cycle now. I had February 16th here for Venus evening star maximum brightness. That's like the one thing on this table that I'm having a hard time finding. I'll show you how to find the maximum elongations, but I ended up hearing that it was, and I celebrated on Valentine's this year, so on February 14th. So if there's truth to that, then that's a pretty cool thing for Venus's maximum brightness to coincide with February 14th, right? If it is the 16th, then 8 years from now it will be on February 14th, because as we know, the whole star retrogrades about 2 degrees and 2 days through the calendar every 8 years, right?
Gemini, the quick way to do it is 72 degrees, 72 days before the star point is maximum.
It's around right, but it's not always right, because that assumes that the star is a regular pentacle, and it's not.
Well, it's that you can kind of count those days, and then 36 days is brightness, and then then she's kind of conjuncting it. Anyway,
it's around the novile as well, when Venus is novile the sun, which is an interesting thing to see. I'm using Stellarium astronomy software and just going with like the most negative and therefore the brightest magnitude. But then you'll get like a 7 or 5 day range, and I'm just picking the middle date. Guy Otwell publishes them. I think there's actually debate in astronomical cycles. It's a really difficult thing for reasons I'll show you here actually, and then I'll get to the point of this. So this is Venus's maximum elongation. Like, this one's a very easy thing to measure. All you do is find out when Venus's speed is equal to the sun's speed. Now, they're not exact there. They're off by 7 arc seconds, because I cast this locally. I was just working with this personally, and I wanted the sun to be beneath the horizon and Venus to be above, right? But this isn't a crazy elongated cycle. And I was wondering at the time if this would be when Venus achieves kind of the most maximum altitude above the ground that I would see in my lifetime. And then I found out no, and that's why I want to share with you today. This is pretty cool. So I'm working now with the sun 5 degrees beneath the horizon, right? That's actually why I chose this particular moment, because it's typically when sun is like 5 degrees below where the sky starts coming out a little bit. Certainly Venus, when maximum elongated like this, when her speed equals the sun, is quite visible when sun's 5 degrees beneath the horizon. And I just needed to like define some rule. All right. So this is that same moment in Stellarium astronomy software, and here in solar system scope astronomy software, we get this kind of heliacal vision. All right. So I just want to point out well, I guess I'll get back to it. So I want to just show the difference between Venus's maximum elongation, which means from Earth's point of view, Sun and Venus are at their greatest angle, right? And therefore, just like moon, when it's furthest from the sun, that's a full moon. Venus can never get full. She can only ever get 48 degrees away from the sun from our point of view, right? When Venus is maximum elongated, that's the largest Venus crescent, which obviously contributes to Venus's brightness. But the tricky thing with Venus is that is not her greatest brightness, because it's this mixture between two things: the size of her crescent from our point of view, and also Venus's proximity, right? And so I've got this now, I think, cast for Valentine's Day for February 14th. And now we get to see Venus. She's less elongated, but she's so much closer to Earth, so she's larger in the sky, right? And there's that blend, and that's why it's not going to be the same in every cycle, because how far is Earth from the sun, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, so I'm casting Valentine's Day here. Here's an image in Stellarium astronomy software. And this is for Richmond, California, where I live in the Bay Area near San Francisco. And just seeing Venus is just crazy high. I feel like, Andrea, maybe you and I were outside in Seattle last time this happened, and you were like Venus, and I was like, no way. Maybe that was some time before. But so I'm looking at Venus at an altitude here, a maximum brightness time of like 34.5 degrees above the ground when the sun is 5 degrees beneath. Well, that got me tripping on when is Venus like going to be at the greatest altitude above the ground where I live. Now, in the southern hemisphere, this won't be true at all. And even from where Gary's living to where I'm living to where Andrea's living in the northern hemisphere, I'm going to show a few places at the end. But it brought me into this interesting code. This is Venus maximum elongation. Okay, so the sun 5 degrees beneath, and Venus is like 34.5 degrees above. But what I realized is it's not really about Venus being in the straightest sign setting. It's about the sun being in the straightest sign setting. So if you haven't studied the straight and crooked signs, like Julija and I spoke about this with Luisa Ribeiro in a recent date we had here at the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. But basically in the northern hemisphere, just think about like when 0 Aries rises, 0 Capricorn's at the midheaven. And 0 Capricorn's the lowest degree to the ground in the northern hemisphere, right? So 0 Aries rises like really slanted like this. They called it crooked in the day. Then think about when 0 Libra's rising. It has to reach up because 0 Cancer's on high, and that's the highest degree of the tropical zodiac in the northern hemisphere sky, right? So signs like, we'll say that they all rise in 2 hours because 24 hours divided by 12 signs gives you 2 hours per sign. That's a fucking lie, right? Like some signs rise really quickly. Those like slanted ones, it's like all the degrees come up at once, where the straight signs take a long time to rise. Well, the straightest signs setting are Pisces and Aries, because the straightest signs rising are Virgo and Libra, and specifically 0 Libra is the straightest degree of the zodiac on the rise. That's all northern hemisphere, okay? So now you can see this is in 2028. So this will be in the Scorpio star point cycle that begins in 2026, right? This will be the end of that cycle. Now we have Venus actually in Taurus with an Aries sun setting, and she's achieving a much greater altitude. And then this led me to like, oh, whoa, look at that's Venus in Taurus. It's Libra rising because the Aries sunset. And it's like, wait a second. Sometime after that one in 2028, in fact, Venus star, so 8 years after that time, we're going to find Venus even more elongated. And then I found the one that it's going to be the greatest altitude Venus I will ever see in my lifetime. And it's here in 2044. And then the cool thing here is you get a Libra rising chart. I'm actually going to move from here. This is 5 degrees sun beneath, so I can show that Venus is even higher above the ground. But I want to go to 0 Libra rising. So you get Libra, Venus, Taurus, where Venus is, Venus, and then the sun dang near Venus's exalted degree. Because we say Venus's exalted degree is 27, but people, modern thinks that's 27 plus. It's actually 26 plus, right? So now I'm going to have to travel a little further east. Here's Baghdad, Iraq, right? So pretty close to Inanna's home of Ur. Where in that year of 2044, we get the sun in Venus's exalted degree, Venus in Taurus, and Libra rising. So these 3 signs most associated with Venus and the particular degree in her sign of honored guest or exaltation. And I think this is maybe why Venus is said to be exalted in this degree. And that it would go way, way, way back to when the star was, you know, in a kind of different realm. But like it's kind of coming full circle or full star circle at this time. Of course, I don't know. This is all speculation. But, you know, I often teach that the reason why Venus rejoices in the 5th house isn't about when Venus moves through the 5th. I mean, that's a dignity. But it's about when the sun goes through the 5th. Because those are the 3rd and the 4th hours of night. And that's taverns and games of chance and romance and passion. And right, that's like 8 to 10 p.m. if you need to have that in clock time consciousness, but clock time sucks, right? So the 3rd and the 4th hours of night, it's dark, we're out at the club. You know what I'm saying? Like that's Venus's joy. Well, it's about the sun moving.
You might
through
be
it.
out at the club. I'm at home.
Right, well, Gary's at home. Actually, I'm like the baby finally went to
Yeah,
sleep,
yeah, you
like
just
passed
put the
out.
baby to bed.
But back in the day, right? So
Yeah, right.
anyway, you know, why does the moon joy in the 3rd? Because the sun moves through the 3rd in the middle of the night, etc. Right? So I'm wondering if we might get some more information about the exalted degrees and looking at the sun in those degrees. And just most interesting, you get this Libra, Taurus, Pisces thing there. So I wanted to show you that. Back to the
So we're
time.
meeting in Baghdad in 20 years. Is that the moral of that story?
Well, I think, you know, I'll probably experience this one from wherever I am. Okay, but well, I would say go to the northern hemisphere for it.
Yeah.
All right, so one more thing, speaking of, in this current cycle, this is like the coolest thing. I've been tripping on it for 10 years now. And it's one of the reasons why when we had our first of these Venus Star seminars now 8 years ago in March of 2017, I started converting a little bit from the 10-degree heliacal rising rule to just working with the conjunction. Like I work with moon sun conjunctions for a new moon instead of the time when I first see the new moon personally. That's not how it was done back in the day, you know? But the reason why is this, and now I'm going pretty far north of the equator, like I'm in Split Lake, Canada, which is, as you can see here, 56 degrees north of the equator, okay? Because in this particular case, the further north, the more this will work, okay? Well, dig this, it looks like Venus and Sun are 5 degrees beneath the horizon, right? But looks can be conceiving or deceiving. So look at how we have Sun 4 degrees beneath the horizon. That's altitude, right? But Venus is above the horizon. So let me show you this in Stellarium astronomy software. Like what magic is this? How are Venus and Sun conjunct, but Venus is visible? And the answer might actually be the same as the answer to this question of why is combustion 8.5 degrees? Because Venus, and actually Mercury, but Venus, of course, would be the one who's offering some visibility because she's so bright. Venus will stray 8.5 degrees from the ecliptic plane, from the sun's path, right? As we know, moon snakes 5 degrees above and below every month. Venus can get 8.5 degrees away. And here's an example where Venus is completely conjunct the sun. That's longitude, right? So 2 degrees, 39 minutes Aries. But the sun is down beneath the ground and Venus is not. I'm going to go back here and show you why, right? So we see their declinations. In this case, it's not an 8.5 degree difference. It's maybe easier to see that in latitude. Latitude is just the distance north or south of the sun's path of the ecliptic. So the sun's always 0 latitude. I don't know why they're showing negative there. But anyway, here's Venus, 8 degrees, 24 minutes, right? There's that 8.5 degrees, like what most of us use for combustion. And that's why, right? So let me show you this. I'm going to dim the lights and we're going to bring in Venus's orbital path. So let me zoom out just a little bit so we can see the entirety of the path, okay? Like Venus is kind of, I don't know what to even call these, but like the ears of her path maybe, or the outstretched arms of her path. Those are the things that can only ever get 48 degrees away from the sun. So Venus can only elongate that far, right? Mercury and Venus, who I like to call the interior decorators because their paths are interior to Earth's, right? We see their entire path when we look to the sun. Mercury can only ever get 28 degrees east or west of the sun, and Venus 48, right? And this sets up a kind of strange thing where Venus's nodes, at least her geocentric nodes, where from Earth we witness Venus's path crossing the sun's path, they're not opposite. They can't be opposite. And actually, every year they conjoin. It's like really strange when you start getting into the planetary nodes. But here they are at this time. And here they are on a chart. Well, before I go there, let me show you this. This is the exact same moment. So on the right, we see Split Lake, Canada, the moment of the Venus-Sun conjunction coming up the star point in Aries. On the left, we see Chelyabinsk in Russia, all right, which is just about the same distance north of the equator. This is Venus visible, clouds allowing, as an evening star in Canada in the same exact moment that she's visible as a morning star in Russia. Right?
Wow.
This is like showing us that in these high northern hemisphere latitudes, Venus will not have a heliacal set. Venus will not have a heliacal rise.
Yeah.
All right. So let me put these.
Adam witnessed this personally, Brett. He was up in, and he
Vermont.
wasn't even that high. He was still in the US in the very high, you remember where it was, Andrea?
He went
was,
up to
New
Vermont.
Hampshire, I think.
Yeah, in New
Oh,
Hampshire.
okay.
He saw Venus set as evening star and then he went to bed, he got up and he saw Venus rise as the morning star the very next day.
Right, so these are these two charts with Venus's nodes on. Again, these are the geocentric nodes. Venus's heliocentric nodes are in Gemini and Sagittarius. It's actually why this will become a little bit more extreme, actually, when Venus Sun star point goes to Pisces and squaring those Gemini Sagittarius heliacal nodes. But with our feet on the ground, we're more concerned with Venus's geocentric nodes, right? So like this is such a crazy chart in Russia. This is actually Venus above the ground.
Yeah.
Right? That's like really hard to tell. You have to like get into the tables where we get to see
Wow.
Venus's altitude is 1.5 degrees. Well, just like to what Gary was saying about what Adam Gainsbourg went to do some time ago is this. Here's this two charts from Split Lake, Canada on the same day. So we have her conjunction, the Cazimi. This is why I chose Split Lake, because it's a place on Earth far north of the equator where during their conjunction, the sun is beneath the ground and Venus is still above. This is the morning that day. And I have heliacal rise question mark. Clouds allowing, I think they'll actually see Venus heliacal rise a few days before that. And so they'll have like a few days, maybe even a week that far north of the equator where they'll get to see Venus morning star in the mornings before sunrise and Venus evening star
Wow.
in the evenings after sunset. And think about like that as part of not only the Aries cycle, but as the Aries cycle is becoming a Pisces cycle, because the Aries, you know, she's just too brave to even set.
Yeah.
But in the Pisces cycle, like that
I'm
shit
not
is weird
letting down.
and crazy hard to explain. And by the way, Julia, for you, interestingly, it's the Libra star point, so the Scorpio star point that's now
That could do
becoming
that.
Libra, where Venus is most south of the
Oh,
sun during their conjunction.
yeah.
So you'll have an opportunity to play this game
Right.
soon.
So, well, that's interesting too. Just we're starting with this extreme Aries kind of latitude, and we end the cycle with the extreme south latitude.
Absolutely.
Which
Yeah,
is
it's like Libra needs to balance it out. So if the northern hemisphere gets the experience and the southern hemisphere too, right?
yeah, right. Oh, thanks so much for that, Gemini. Because you're going to be doing more of that for your segment next weekend.
I
Yeah.
am. This like incredible distance and declination or latitude between Venus and the sun during this coming conjunction just inspired me to share a little bit about working with your own natal Venus parallels. What other
Right.
planets and what other stars was Venus kind of following on the same path through the sky? And which, by the way, goes all the way back to Babylon, just like the Venus cycle does. And then also looking at the Venus star point and seeing there's some pretty intriguing parallels for the Venus-Sun conjunctions of this particular cycle.
Fantastic. So there you go. Gemini will be doing more of his magic with us next week. Just let's continue. I've got your slides coming up, Gary and Andrea. This is just the Aries star points, the degrees over the, since 2005. And you can see that they oscillate a little bit sort of in the same area as they slowly go backwards. So look at those dates in your own life and, to actually understand the theme or the houses this Aries star point has moved through in your life or it might have transitioned from one house to another, or over an angle, or over your sun, or these are the kind of things that, you know, we kind of let's say concentrate on for the Venus star points, because they're all got a different character in so many ways. So Gary, this is the slide you chose here.
Yeah. You know, one of the things as an Aries, as well, actually as what you might call an uber Aries, I have half of my chart is in Aries. I've always felt like I remember because I'm actually a Virgo moon and it's a nocturnal chart. So you know, until I got to high school, I didn't identify as an Aries at all. I remember reading the horoscopes for Aries and thinking, well, who is that asshole? You know, but I found out, you know, later, but that it was me. But this idea that, you know, Aries gets painted with the word warrior, you know, like Mars, you know, but you have to remember it's also the exaltation of the sun, you know, and it's also just it's the first sign, you know, and so this idea of being first and beginnings. And so my friend Kelly Lee Phipps did this wonderful graphic back in the day. He was going to publish a book with this stuff, and unfortunately he passed away before the book was published. But this idea that there's a multivalent nature, for instance, the pioneer archetype, you know, I think that's equally one of the things I didn't realize it at the time, but one of the things I did identify as a kid was like Lewis and Clark, you know, they explored the Western pioneer of the US. Evel Knievel, I definitely I mean, I remember when I was a kid jumping my bike over ramps and stuff, trying to be like.
I've got two Aries brothers. There was always lots of blood and accidents.
Oh my God. So now, once I got into high school, yeah, the warrior came. I started playing football and stuff, but you know, particularly for women, maybe like that whole warrior thing. No, I'm not saying women can't be warriors. I'm just saying they don't always identify with them. But this idea of being a pioneer or a trailblazer, I mean, women are really constantly opening up new ground because they've been excluded from a lot of things for a long time. So there's a lot of that solar feminine that is very much this pioneer trailblazer archetype. And of course, then they become the hero for the ones that follow behind them, right? And so this was just a way of like trying to think of the archetype being reminding people that it's multivalent. Yes, it can be a warrior, as much an adventurer, you know, definitely, you know, I identify more with like the adventurer and the pioneer, and the daredevil thrill seeker more than anything, you know. But I think, I can't remember if it was Brett or you, Julia, that mentioned the conjunction is in Aries, but the actual rise, now, unless you're at 50 degrees north, where, you know, you'll see Venus rise while it's still in Aries, it's going to be a few days later when Venus gets to Pisces before we actually see her with our eyes. So this idea that the moment we see her inaugurates the experience of the cycle, well, that's going to be Pisces. Now, so it's possible that the conjunction is going to activate the Aries archetype, and the heliacal rise is going to activate the Pisces archetype, and we're going to have, this is the first cycle in our lifetimes where it's on this cusp. And I think they're both going to be activated. And so when you begin to think about the nature of Pisces, I think I put another one in here for the Pisces with the 5 Pisces.
Yes, you do. This one?
No, there's another one with the 5-pointed star, I think.
No, you only gave me 2. Sorry, but
Okay. Well,
yeah.
anyway,
I
so
can
we
go
should
to the
think about
5-pointed star.
Yeah, we can think about the Pisces archetype as like the dreamer, the mystic, the artist, in other words, don't get stuck on Pisces being one thing, right? Like there's a lot of different ways. But to me, when I think about Aries and Pisces, I think about Jason. The archetypal Aries hero was Jason, who went in search of the golden fleece. But he didn't do it alone. He went with a team of heroes, and one of them was Orpheus, who was the guy who played the lyre and could calm the savage beasts with his music. That's very Piscean, And so this teamwork between the Aries and the Pisces might actually be very prevalent in this next cycle and then later, when Jason reaches the Golden Fleece with his team of heroes, but he can only get the Golden Fleece with the help of his future wife, Medea, who was you have to be
Very
careful.
Scorpio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just add a bit real quick? Like,
Yeah, please.
interestingly, the golden fleece was sent by Hermes, right? The golden ram was sent to save the twins, Heli and
That's
Phrixus.
right.
So we have in the star the Gemini exterior, the Aries interior, and then the Scorpio exterior, which feels very much like Medea, right? The sorceress.
Yes.
So that's a kind of an intriguing thing. I haven't linked to that myth before. So thanks again, Gary.
Yeah, and you can think of her as being Piscean in the sense that she's sort of this mystical. She, for instance, rubs him with some oil, anoints him with some kind of oil that sort of keeps him from getting caught on fire when these fire-breathing bulls, do their thing. And then she gives him some kind of concoction that puts the dragon to sleep. So, yes, Jason is this Aries, trail pioneer, adventurer that goes into, and yes, he fights a few battles along the way, but he can't reach his goal without Orpheus or without Medea. And so it feels like there's this idea of the sacred marriage of the masculine and feminine cooperating together in order to and to me, the golden fleece is, it's basically our higher self. It's the symbol for actualization in modern psychological terms, idea of self-actualization, for instance, and to be self-actualized. And Maslow eventually revised his theory that self-actualization wasn't the highest thing you could do. Once you're actualized, then you help other people actualize. And so helping, and think about this, helping other people actualize means you're actualizing the collective, right? And so actualizing collective would be the highest thing we could do. And so there's this sort of synergy between the Aries and Pisces cycles this time around. I think is very
well. Also, that 0 point, Neptune's going to do it. Saturn's doing it.
There's another marriage of opposites. Saturn is like absolute hard boundaries, thou shalt not pass, and Neptune is like there's no
Boundaries, but boundaries.
There's no
Come on,
boundaries.
everybody! Come on, everybody!
Yeah. No.
Yes.
So there's this really extreme blending of opposites that's happening.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Carrie. That's great.
This one is on the left, we have the 18th century versions of the current star points that are happening. And so this is why I'm talking about the yellow are the transits of Venus, right? What scientists call the transit of Venus, where it's an eclipse of the sun by Venus, essentially, right? We had one in 2004. In the 18th century, they happened in 1761 and 1769.
Yeah.
And it's
interesting. Gary, sorry, can I ask, so does that say like the points that's now in Aries, it was in Gemini back then, and it's precessed all the way through Gemini and Taurus and through all of Aries to this point?
Let's see.
You mean the transits?
Can you go back to the 5-star that you had there, Julia? No, the other one.
Oh, sorry, this one?
Yeah, let's see. It would have been the Aries, it would be the
No, okay. So you asking about the transits?
No. I'm
It would be
asking,
the
like,
Capricorn point that eventually moves to the Aries point, Brett.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Oh,
yeah.
I see. You're looking back here. This,
Yeah.
this,
Moves counterclockwise.
yeah.
Yeah.
Move back from
And
there.
it takes
Yeah, so it's 250
years.
years. It's
Yeah.
250 years for, let's say, this Gemini point now to become where this Aries point is.
Yes.
Yes,
Roughly.
that's what
Yeah.
we're just looking at, the
Yeah.
constitution and stuff, right? So I think those Gemini points, like the one you have circled, is now the Aries point, right? Because it retrogrades.
Yes. 250 years. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but all of these points that we're at right now, the Venus star point would have been hitting the exact same degrees
Yes.
during the American and
Yeah.
indeed the French revolutions.
Yeah. Well, I made this years ago as well, Gary. So the star points now, the current star points, and the 70s. It just sort of shows it in the
Yeah, they're
snip,
within a
different
what,
light.
like 10 minutes of one another, right?
Yeah, it's the same.
1774,
Yeah.
2 degrees
And
48.
Yeah.
And this star hasn't gone all the way around, right? It's gone a fifth of the zodiac.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
what was in Gemini is now in Aries. What was in Aries is in
I
Capricorn.
think it's
like that.
actually the other way.
No, because they retrograde, right? Like what's in Aries is going to go into Pisces. And then so
Hang
and
on a
this-
second. I have a
Yeah, because they go backwards, but so it's 1,000 years for one complete, kind of cycle of one star point to go the full zodiac. Yeah. So for this star point to come all the way back.
Sorry, Gary, I totally butted in on
No,
like
sorry,
just on the rabbit hole.
1,250 years. 1,250 years. Five
Yeah.
times. 250.
Yeah, five times 250. Yeah, think about it, Gary. The Aries is going to go into Pisces, right?
Can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure. Hang on one sec.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having a little Virgo moment here.
That's all right.
I just want to clear this up. So, as near as I can tell, this is the way it goes. So, oh yeah, you're right, Gemini. Yeah, you're right. It's traveling from Gemini to Aries. You're right, and then Capricorn to Sagittarius. And the way that I figured this out is that I was looking at the shape of these loops, and I was noticing that currently we have a downward facing Z. And I had all of these shapes figured out, and I looked at about 100 years worth, and okay, I think I understand. And I said, well, let me go back another 100 years to make sure I got it. And I started seeing an upward going, and I thought, oh my God, what the hell is going on? But it's because the star point can only be in one of Venus's nodes at a time. So it'll be in the Gemini part, and then this star point that's in Capricorn will move into Sagittarius, and then we'll have the upward the north node of Venus transits.
Yeah, for people who haven't seen that, these are the types of shapes that Venus makes.
Notice that there's this upward loop. So this idea that Venus is as far north of the ecliptic, that's why when you go to Canada, you can see Venus set one day and rise the next day, because she's so far north of the ecliptic, she's more easily visible.
Because squaring the heliacal nodes, which are now in Gemini Sagittarius, and that's why Gemini Sagittarius get those S shapes, right? But the nodes themselves will change signs. That's just like a really, really long cycle. And so it's just a reminder.
Yeah, that's like 40,000 years or something. I can't remember.
So like while the cycles repeat, they also never will. You can never step in the same river twice. I mean, not only because there's so many other planets, but like literally as the nodes of Venus move, some of the phenomena that are happening now, it just can't ever happen.
Yeah, that's
again.
right.
We're in the middle, like the transits happen mid Gemini, so we're in the middle of that sort of cycle in Gemini Sagittarius, which is another 2,000 years or something.
And notably, the American Revolution, and I'll stop sharing and you can maybe look at that other one again. The American Revolution happened at the same time, when we were having the transits of Venus
Yeah.
and Gemini. Now,
Yeah.
what does the Gemini star point represent? Gemini is a common sign. The mutable signs are known as common signs. It's a sign of the people. And the difference, most people that, academics I've heard, difference between the outcome of the American Revolution and the French Revolution is that the French Revolution, it was the academics, it was the educated people who were sort of driving the discourse of the revolution. But in America, you had pamphleteers and the common people where it was about common sense. Hey, we're being taxed and we don't have any say in the process. People are murdering our citizens and then they're being tried in England. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And so this idea that the American Revolution had the outcome that it did because it was a revolution where in fact, John Adams specifically says that the revolution happened in the minds of the people long before there was any fighting. And so that's this idea that the Gemini, even though we're in the Aries star point, it's part of a 5-pointed star that also is informed by the Gemini, right? And so there's this idea of that this discourse, the discourse between the regular people, and that's what's a little bit concerning about where we are right now, is we're actually at a very different place where we're, rather than everybody talking to one another and saying, hey, there's a lot of polarization and there's an inability to talk to one another about what's going on. And so in many ways, we have kind of a very opposite, although, there were like loyalists and revolutionaries back at that time as well.
Totally. And English folks living here in French. It's interesting to see is like after that comes the Constitution, right? And
yeah. And it's a very long process. I mean, and here's the thing, whether you want to call them framers or founders, whatever you want to call them, the people that were driving this dialogue about the nature of government, and they said, look, you can see with your own eyes, you have the British government is putting soldiers in your home, kicking you out of your own bed and putting soldiers in your home. They're taxing you to no end. They're killing your people and sending them off to trial in another place so they can get off scot-free. The nature of government is evil. And so therefore, when we institute our government, we should try to have as little of it as possible. So this is a very libertarian ideal, and it was an idea that was driven by the practical experience of the people saying, yeah, we've experienced the evil of government overreach. We've experienced it very personally. And so we understand what these educated people are telling us, that the nature of government is to overreach and become, necessary evil or whatever. So there was this very libertarian strain to the American Revolution. And in fact, they overreached with the libertarianism, because the first government was under this thing called the Articles of the Confederation, which was basically just an agreement between 13 states to kind of stick together. But there was no central authority. There was no federal government. And so what happened was we sent ships over to trade in the Mediterranean, and the pirates would get them. We didn't have any way, at that time, the Barbary coast, the coast of that, they were enslaving people, and it was really bad. And we had no way to protect our citizens. And so then people started saying, well, maybe we need to rethink this idea. And then you had this huge debate over what were called the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. There were people saying we need a strong federal government. We need to raise a navy to protect our ships. And other people were saying, if you go down that road, it turns out bad, and you have to pit one side of the government against the other. So there's checks and balances, and you have to have a Bill of Rights. For instance, the freedom of speech and so on. And so this entire process from the beginning of the revolution all the way until the formation of the Constitution was like, I mean, so five Venus star points is 8 years, right? It was like, I think 7 or 8 of those 8 year. So it took a long time for us to figure this out.
Mm.
You see, the first time around. And so we're in the middle of something that has been going on for a while, and we're still on the road to find out, as Cat Stevens once.
Yeah,
Really
but
good.
also redoing it, so much being redone and shifting. And, I'm just thinking of Mercury, Venus together for the Aries star point, like retrograde, like this is redoing everything from.
But it's fascinating how this idea of like, oh, let's cut the government, well, that was the original impulse, was like,
Right.
these people in London have really messed us over, and we want as small a government as possible. That was the original idea. So you can see the return of these original ideas showing up. But if you don't realize that, you go, what the hell are these people doing? They're just firing a bunch of people. And they're not just firing them either. They're giving them severance and everything. They're buying them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, there's a whole lot of restructuring going on in Europe. The thoughts of what is to come, like, again, there's just it's everywhere. I mean, we've been focusing on the US, but hang on, why doesn't this work? Sorry, I'm just
and that's the thing, is that our relationship with Europe, our relationship with the rest of the world is changing. And so there's this idea that one country, what's really changing, Julia, is the idea that one country should be the sort of hegemon.
Supreme,
and be the one that's like the world police and the World Bank. That's actually changing, and I'm not sure that's not a good thing.
But that's also a very Saturn Neptune dynamic where right. So we've got that in the
what's
background.
hopeful about that, Julia, is I looked back, Saturn conjunct Neptune at the Aries point is very rare. Very rare. If you go back, like I don't have
the
my
closest was like 720 or something.
There was one in like 555, which was like the territorial zenith of the Byzantine Empire under Justinian. I remember that. And then there was another one in like 500 BC, which was like the reforms of Solon of Athens. And that's really considered the birth point of Athenian democracy.
Right.
Those are two pretty positive examples, and so I don't know. I mean,
I remember also the one. Well, I thought there was one around 700, but it's probably that 555 one that you saw. And Muhammad was born not long after that.
Interesting. Wow.
Something.
Yeah.
And
that would, Saturn, a patriarchal religious figure, right?
Yeah. And then Maurice Fernandez, I remember sort of saying, in a Saturn Neptune talk at our retreat, in regard to the kind of like the new guru, the new gods, the new spiritual sort of, presence. What is that? And we kind of laughed about it being AI.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah.
The new spiritual sort of God.
I've done some experiments with AI generating images. Like when you read the Picatrix, for instance, it tells you, okay, here's an image for Venus. It's
You're putting in the words.
There's a woman riding a stag, and she's holding a comb in one hand and a mirror or an apple in the other, or something like that. Say, okay, AI, it make me, and it's wow. I mean, I can't do that. You know what I'm saying? And
no, I love it. Yeah, I love the image stuff.
Now you have to check, by the way, if you do this, check up on it. Don't take AI's word for it.
Oh, absolutely.
I asked AI what happened the last time Saturn was conjunct Neptune in Aries, and it gave me some date. And I was like, no, Saturn was not conjunct. I was checking it. And sorry, So
That's how wrong it can quickly go so wrong.
yeah,
But I mean, what's really alarming for me is what I said before is the scams that now AI is able to create, right? Like, as though, check into this cryptocurrency, give us $350. It's all through an app, it's all AI, and it's completely a scam. So it's, oh my
well, if
God.
you get an email from somebody about
But it's so quick and so, it's so sort of
unsolicited
real and
emails,
uh,
unsolicited DMs. Never ever click
yeah.
on anything in an
Well, I don't think it's
unsolicited
even emails
email.
now. They get you into this app or something. And so, anyway, be careful out there. So, Andrea, sorry we've kept you waiting for your slide. Um, this is now looking at, well, over to you. Over to you.
Okay. For something a little or maybe a lot different now. So one of the things with, because of my own wiring, you could say, I and the prominence of all of the asteroids and dwarf planets that I highlight here, and my own journey, you could say, to learn how to see in the dark, because that's the feminine, is the mystery, what we can't see with our eyes necessarily, but what we feel deeply. And that to me is what I call archaic, is like a fancy word for like ancient, What's archaic for me imparts the notion of what's primal, what's first, what's irreducible. And it also for me has a solar component to it naturally. Because if we're looking at the sun, as I said, in a very general way, as what we are, and the planets as aspects or facets that amplify, receive, share those particular aspects of the solar force that we are. For me, it's, we're so dominant in what we can see and logic, but the feminine is actually logos, and it's the dark. When you look at initiations, for example, Demeter, Ceres, the initiates always have blindfolds on, which is an idea of surrendering to what we think we know to discover more of what we don't know, to be informed by wisdom. So all this to say, with the exception of Vesta, under the right conditions, none of these goddesses are visible to the naked eye. So to me, I am bringing back the idea of the feminine as what holds the matrix of life together. And so Hestia, these are the Greek and the Roman names. Pallas, Athena, Minerva, Hera, Juno, Demeter, Ceres, Aries, Discordia. I don't have that in there. And these are the complements here, the mirror images, are aspects of the feminine that help revitalize what the ancient logos of the feminine is, which is to be the space in which phenomena arise, the visible phenomena arise from this space. So there is something to be, from my experience, of mapping these goddesses to certain parts of the Venus cycle. And I won't go into all this now because I'm going to be talking about this more during my piece. But one of the things that I also in the intervening years have become very interested in is declination. It's one of the things that I call the invisibles, right? The invisible factor, because planets either parallel, which is like a conjunction, or contraparallel, which is like an opposition, are the position of planets above or below the celestial equator, which is the Earth's equator projected into space. And again, I'm going to speak about a little bit more about that in the presentation. But I looked at what was going on in the Venus-Sun interior conjunction chart, and the ephemeris, and notice by declination that Pallas, Athena, and Chiron are parallel Venus. And one of the things that, and Pallas Athena is at 14 degrees of Aquarius, which I feel she's very comfortable in Aquarius, right? She is the one, she's the strategist. She can see, she can weave literally what is similar between seemingly dissonant or different. She can catch the theme or the thread of seemingly different disciplines, you could say. So she gives us that power of, and she's also the goddess of weaving, right? And crafts. So there's something about weaving together seemingly disparate parts, which is also the feminine. And what's interesting is in my presentation, I'm going to give a very literal example of how Venus with Pallas Athena and Chiron can manifest in nature for us at this time, because so what does feminine leadership look like in nature as an example? And again, I'm not talking about just women, I'm talking about the feminine in all genders. But what's fascinating to me too is this, there's this beautiful, again, this is idea of what's invisible carrying and being the strata in which the visible arises. And it's almost going back to what seems to be what I'm feeling into this is the masculine and feminine. It's really at I would say maybe an esoteric level, is mirroring a lot of what's happening in terms of gender nonconformity. And where has it become too outwardly expressed and not enough inwardly manifested and alchemized and owned and received? So where is there, again, coming into a balance of where are we past, because Pallas Athena is the androgyne too, right? Where can we become more uniquely positioned in what our specific masculine and feminine looks like, not how it's projected by society on what it should look like? And there's something about this, again, coming back into nature representing a certain form of leadership that really can inspire us. When Saturn and Neptune go into Aries, one of the things that can manifest is creating new forms of culture that include the whole. What are more holistic forms of culture that we can start individually living as in our own communities? Uranus going into Gemini. Ourselves first. How do we put that into practice ourselves and then test it out in our communities and make that the focus? So we're not focusing so much on government or institutions to hold the roles anymore. Where are we coming into bolder, more inclusive forms of leadership that include feminine modes of leadership as well? So that's what I'm going to be speaking to. And, in general, I'll just say that I've found that these goddesses really mirror and support. Like Venus is the outer manifestation of the feminine, supported by the archetypes of these goddesses. And I just love that. And it's like I play with this in my own chart, my own life with my clients. I hold journeys with people to go into, and you can discover what I call your archaic avatar is, that supports your Venus. And it's just fun to explore that and to really bring more of the dynamic relational nature of the feminine and coming back to what we can't see necessarily, enjoying what we can and receiving from that. But what about the power of the subtle and what we can't see and our felt experience of things? And to me, that's Aries, is what is my direct experience of something out of my head into my body? What is that telling me? How is that propelling me forward? How can I lead from my instincts and include that? And that's another thing I'm going to be talking about. Pallas Athena, for me, she represents feminine power. Well, she, to me, is how we thread the three centers of intelligence of our bodies: the head, the heart, and the hara. And it's also interesting that the Pallas Athena discovery chart has the nodes in Pisces and in Virgo,
Mm.
and also has Venus and the Sun in Aries. So there's an added element of Pallas Athena being really, really strong. It's like, how do we bring about all of our intelligences, including our instinctual and our emotional intelligences, and to play, to become more fuller in our intelligences as humans.
Oh, I love it. Oh,
Good.
Venus was parallel Pallas Athena in the Leo star point, and also will be with the Scorpio star point coming.
Awesome.
So
ah,
3 interior star points in a row.
Great.
Just like
right.
astronomically kind of
Interesting.
impossible given Pallas's incredible orbit.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and
Wow.
Pallas goes latitudinally. She goes up and down like in the 40s or something, like by latitude. It's crazy. Yeah.
Huh? I love how you've put these together, Andrea, and I can't wait for your session next week because it just makes so much sense looking at the cycle. I mean, I'm just looking at where my, let's say, evening star Venus is in phase, you know, at the Hero Juno sort of section, and it makes a lot of sense, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
And I love the Demeter series being part of that longer underworld journey. It makes so much sense.
Both sides, exactly.
You know, and the Eris, kind of the quick dip into the underworld energy that is, you know, quite chaotic. It's great. So tune in, everyone. You want to know more about this. And of course, Andrea, your article that is in our Time Lord's latest Time Lords magazine is also on astro.com. So you can read about that more there, everyone. Okay. So thank you, Andrea. We look forward to that. So look, let's just go quickly ahead. The Capricorn star point, here it is next January, conjunct Mars. I do know in like 2020, well, sorry, 2000, and what does this refer to? 2018, there was a lot of, you know, angst against Trump back then. So there might be some recall for a lot of actions that he's taken, repeating in that sense, because it was also the 8-year cycle that we're in. And then we have the Scorpio star point that we finish with. It looks like Gary's tuned off now because he was in a cafe, or the storm, hopefully the storm hasn't got him, or the internet went out or whatever. But thanks for Gary for being here. The Scorpio star point, Gary is going to talk, this is the USA's what we call pre-birth star point, 0 Scorpio, and Gary is going to talk more about that return that is in this next cycle, let's say. And again, we've got the Mars influence there. So it's quite a cycle that we have coming up. And then this is the table that we're talking about, where all the star points, or the deacons, the Aries star point, well, the retrograde begins in the Sun decan at 11 degrees, but the star point is in a Mars decan. The Gemini star point's in a Mars decan. The last Leo star point is in a Mars decan, but the next Leo star point will move to Jupiter. So that will be 19 degrees in whatever year now, I can't think, 27 or something. And then the Scorpio star point is also the last star point. So there's 2 points that are about to move into the Jupiter decans, right, over this next sort of cycle. And then the Capricorn star point in the Mars decan as well. The ones that are in the middle have got a while to go. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That we've been living in this time frame where all the star points have been in Mars ruled decans. So, you know, anyway, I'm kind of looking ahead at the Capricorn star point and so on. I'm not going to get into this, but just quickly, again, putting together the Mars-Venus cycle, and again, the Venus-Mercury retrograde cycles that are really quite a rare combination of these few months that we don't see very often. Repeat, you know, kind of repeating these kind of time frames as well for the Mars-Venus cycle, which are interesting dates if we look at them more closely. And Yeah, the current synod. Again, I've talked about this. So look, that's about all of what we're going to talk about today. It's gone a lot longer than we thought, but that usually happens because we love talking about these topics. And it's again the prelude to what we're doing next week, because we're all going to do our sessions and we'll have some discussion in between, but we're probably not going to have as long a time to discuss everything. Do you know what I mean? So I'm glad that we've had these 2 hours to actually talk about, kind of more of what we're going to do, and, more specialized, let's say, conversations, and masterclass, as we call it. And these are the masterclasses we've done for, as I said, the 11th one. We've done 10 before the 11th one. We do have this huge volume of content that we have collected over these times. And it is available, and we'll add this one to it. So for anyone that really wants to delve into this incredible kind of library and archive of content, well, with this one, it will be 50 hours. So, so you can go there if you want. Time Lords magazine, the next one will be out just in time for Neptune into Aries. And I am thinking of doing an agent, let's say, what do you call it? Connection online, free update where we celebrate the Neptune into Aries. On the Sunday, the 30th of March, it will be here. Anyway, you'll find out more about it, but I'm thinking of a gathering that is about sort of activating this 0 point through Neptune and collective influence, let's say. And Andrea, I was going to say, when you were talking about, the collect, the Aries warrior and back to the collective of Pisces, and Gary was mentioning that, I was thinking of mycelium. Like the mushrooms growing and doing all this underground work, or the grassroots, as we could also call it, and remembering how powerful that is.
Yes, exactly.
As a force, when all this chaos is up above, we can still do so much amazing connecting, working, and again, kind of with a new sort of view of what's ahead. And for those of you that are nearer to Melbourne, or we've also got some people coming from overseas for our next retreat, we are giving away a free CIA membership with coming to the retreat. If you've already got a CIA membership, we'll extend your membership for a year. So it's going to be great. It's a winter retreat, which we haven't done one, but the night sky is fantastic in winter because you got the longer time to watch. There's more night. And yeah, we're doing a whole lot of wonderful sort of topics. So do have a look online for that if you're interested. And then this is our event that we have coming up. So I'll be talking about the Venus star point in various ways, which you've seen a little bit of what I've showed today, and adapting that to also your personal charts. Then Andrea will be continuing what she has just talked about, the Aries Venus cycle and the archaic feminine. So looking at a 19-month cycle and the next 19-month cycle in her way of understanding these archaic feminine archetypes, which is fantastic. Gary will be talking about the Venus star point at the Aries point for the USA VSP, as we call it. And again, all the amazing stuff he puts together as well. And then Gemini, Venus star point, declination, latitude, parallels, and all the other things that he can that he sort of puts up together for us. So if you're a CIA member, you already automatically get a 30% off. Or if you see this and you'd like to join us for that bigger event on the 1st and 2nd of March, or the 2nd and 3rd of March in Australia, please use 20% off CIA code to get the discount. And I hope that we can see you all join us, or some of you join us, for more in-depth version of what we have talked about today. Thank you, Andrea, so much.
It's a
We look
pleasure.
forward to next week. And thank you again, Gemini, and your little sweetheart there.
Please bring Maya next time too.
Yeah.
All the time.
Hello, gorgeous.
And I have the same Venus star cycle.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, lovely, lovely. Again,
Very as well.
the synastry of Venus star cycles, that's another thing we actually have never done. That might have to be the Libra star point
Yeah, that sounds
down the track, right? So we always come up with a theme. And Gary, yes, thank you for being here. We love your work as well, and we look forward to next weekend. So yeah, look, thanks for all for joining us. Keep in touch with the CIA. Our probably next update will be for the Aries ingress around the 18th of March. I think I've scheduled it for. So keep in touch, and otherwise, you know where to find us. So have a great, what do you call it, Venus retrograde experience.
Yes.
And even better, join us next weekend so you'll get more out of it. All right.
Ian
Thank you so
Martin.
much.